Australians.
Awesome. Looking forward to it. It'll be great.
Beautiful. Okay, I will hit record.
Awesome. I'm going to go live as usual with
Yep.
I think there's a few people on YouTube that might need some common sense, an injection of common sense. It's been a crazy. When did we last speak? Because it's been a crazy little while, hasn't it?
2 weeks. Yeah.
2 weeks.
Say 2 weeks.
So it was the Saturday of the Queensland election when we first started talking.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Crazy.
Yeah. So let me just get the Culture Cafe Instagram up here so I can do an update.
No worries. I'm just going to let people
halfway through
stream. We had quite a few people view the last one, even though the graphics were terrible.
A couple hundred or so, was it?
Yeah, it was pretty. Yeah, it was pretty good. It was pretty good. It was good seeing everyone come in. But the quality on this one should be a lot better. All right. Hello.
Okay. Start recording now and we'll get into it.
Let's do it. Hello, everyone.
You ready to go?
Yeah, let's do it, man. Let's do it.
All right.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, listeners of the Culture Cafe and all of the live streamers currently listening to Joel's live stream. We're doing a US election recap today and discussing potential implications moving forward with the results that we've seen. And we are joined by Joel Jammal, a now quite frequent guest on the Culture Cafe podcast. Joel, welcome, and how are you going?
I'm very good. Pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to have you. So I guess we'll jump straight into it.
Go for it.
Bit of a different result than what was predicted last time you were on here chatting with us.
Not really. I made a number of predictions, and some of them actually contradicted each other. I predicted a Trump landslide, possibly even I wasn't ruling out a 49-state landslide. But I also predicted that these things would get dragged out and people would a lawfare would certainly overtake the airwaves. And I think we've certainly seen that. I mean, one of the biggest problems we're noticing in a lot of these states is there are a number of issues of fraud, not widespread fraud, but there is fraud. And we're finding that a number of there's these anomalies, whether it be with the software that's counting these votes, like Dominion, that's used in 30 different states. And an example of that being, the 6,000 states that flipped a election in one of the counties in where was it? That was in Michigan. But there are a number of other irregularities and mishappenings from the Democrats that didn't let Republicans survey the votes being counted, as we saw in Pennsylvania. And there's tens of thousands of old people that have been dead for, decades that have voted as well. So there's significant questions to be answered. And as I did predict, this was going to get dragged out. And election day, don't be surprised if it turns into election week, election month, and election quarter, which is what we might actually see.
Okay, interesting. So you've touched on something that I'm sure everyone wants to hear about right now because it is a very hot topic, the election fraud.
Election fraud. Yeah, that one's...
That's a pretty serious, that's very, very serious to have a fraudulent election. How exactly, explain to us what exactly has been done or is being, what people are being accused of doing, because I myself am not quite sure how much of it is true because there's so much clout floating around right now.
Okay, well, I think we should start with the definition of what election fraud is. It's where you do a ballot vote, and it's done with malicious intent to sabotage the voting process, basically. And an example of that might be, I don't know, it could be you say that you look, because there's this thing called ballot harvesting, for example, where Democrats or Republicans, they go around to houses and they collect the ballot for you if it's a mail-in ballot and you vote by mail, and they say, we'll return it for you. They open the envelope, they see who you voted for, and maybe they'll throw it out and get rid of it. And maybe there's situations where people will collect your ballot if you don't use it, and they will vote on your behalf and hand that in and forge your signature. That's another example. And the Democrats really recently, in one of their coronavirus stimulus packages they were launching, they wanted to remove the requirement to check signatures on these ballots. Why would they do that? Well, some would say that they knew it was going to happen, but I don't know, man. I don't know. Look, the election fraud is not widespread. However, it's very difficult to prove, and it has certainly happened. We knew for the longest time that these mail-in ballots were going to be a headache. In fact, in the primaries this year, when the Democrats were trying to work out who was going to be their nominee, 500 NPR did an analysis, and they found that over 500,000 mail-in ballots were thrown out because, for a number of different reasons, whether it be fraud, whether it be problems with the signature, a whole ton of things. So we've known from the start that mail-in ballot was not the best way. We've known from the start that you should do it in person if you can, but nonetheless, you never let a good crisis go to waste, right? You make sure that the Democrats made sure that these Democrat governors made sure that universal mail-in ballots would be happening so that they could increase their vote. And possibly, I don't want to imply malicious intent, but with some of them, you got to ask these questions. Some of them, I think they knew that these mail-in ballots were going to do it. And look, as I said, Ian, none of this is surprising. None of it is surprising at all. I mean, if a 23-year-old in Australia that's been following politics for 5 years, that hasn't studied at university political studies, I studied property economics. If I could pick up on this 3 months ago in August and write an article on it, what the hell is wrong with the Americans over there? A lot of Republicans pulled them up on this. I mean, Tim Pool was railing on this for a very long time, months, and they still ran headlong into it. But look, that's very briefly what the little history of that is.
Okay, yeah. So we've got election fraud, which there's a history of it, but it hasn't been super, super widespread in the past. But this election, we're looking at it being a little bit more of a player in the dynamics of the election, especially due to the crisis, the pandemic, which has kept a lot of people at home. We've got a lot of issues with the mail-in ballots. So how much do you think election fraud has impacted the numbers that we've seen?
Look, it's impossible to know, man. I couldn't tell you that. I wouldn't know. And that's the troubling thing. Everyone finds it they're skeptical at face value. The fact that Joe Biden, a guy that stayed in his basement, he was not having big rallies. He was having rallies where he could barely fill a parking lot. He'd have, 10 circles with one journalist at the center of each circle, and he'd be doing this rally in front of them. You didn't see him. There were days he didn't do any campaign rallies, whereas Trump, on the other hand, was doing over 5 rallies a day. In fact, over 3 days, he did something like 14 rallies in the last days of the election. He's a machine. I don't know what he's taking, but he's a machine.
He's taking something.
He's taking something. And the guy, he was working very hard. He was zigzagging across the country, and he was doing a really solid job. How on earth did Joe Biden get millions more votes than Obama, who was a very charismatic character? Trump, he increased his vote from 2016 by 10 million votes this time. So he's got the second highest.
Wow, vote. Trump's popular. That's a popular vote, is it?
The popular vote, yeah, absolutely.
So Trump's gotten more popular.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, why are you? I'm not surprised by that. But the problem is that I mean, look, and this is the thing, man. I told you about all these things last week, a couple of weeks ago on the Saturday. I told you the Hispanic community, how he helped them. It turns out that the Hispanic community like the wall because they know people that have been raped by these gangs of coyotes coming through the wall. Coyotes meaning not the animal coyote, but it's a technical term for a human trafficker. And it turns out that Trump's vote percentage for the Hispanic community went from 30% in 2016 to as high as 35 or more percent. And the same with the black community. What did I tell you about the black community? Can you remember?
You did say that the black community vote would be a lot higher this year than previous years.
Yeah.
And I believe it was at 15% and above, and a number like that would essentially secure the election.
Exactly. And do you know what Trump got? He got
I don't know. Please.
In 2016, he got 10% of the black vote in that community. As you just remembered accurately, the saying goes, if he gets 15% or more of the vote, a Democrat will never win the presidency again. He got 15% of the vote. In fact, he got 17% of the black vote for men. So
wow. Okay.
People are waking up, because people are waking up to this fact. It wasn't Obama. Obama was there for 8 years. He didn't pass criminal reform at all. No prison reform. So you had the mass incarceration of black people. And what did the Democrats offer? The Democrats offered two candidates, one of which was a prosecutor, Kamala Harris, and we went through her record, prosecuted 3,000 people on low-level drug charges, marijuana related. And we had freaking Joe Biden, who passed the, 1984, 1986, 1988, 1994 crime bills, which led to the mass incarceration of black people. You really think that there aren't going to be a few people that they can remember a few years ago, and they can remember why their brother or their sister or their uncle are in prison? I don't know. They literally picked the worst candidates. I don't know if this is a power play to show how much power they've got over the election, but I don't see how these were good candidates when you were canvassing them. I just don't see it. But I don't. Yeah, look, man. Don't be surprised that his vote increased. I mean, the guy had record low unemployment for all these communities, for women as well, a 70-year low for women. He actually, the fact that he increased his votes by 10 million votes, I'm not surprised at all. But isn't it strange that Joe Biden got a more popular vote than Donald Trump as well, but also of Barack Obama, who was a very charismatic character at the time?
That is a really interesting point that you bring up there, how Obama, who was wildly popular, both within the states and outside of the states, and still is, and you compare him to Biden, who, even when you talk to people who would say, oh, if I was in America, I would definitely be voting for Biden, I hate Trump, so forth, he still isn't nearly as popular as Obama. And people still, when they say that, they still know that Biden, he hasn't got any real promise. Now, I don't know much about politics, but I feel like I know about people, and Biden doesn't scream leader to me at all. Yet, you're saying that he's received a higher popular vote than Obama. That baffles me. Like, that really baffles me.
There's more.
Because Obama is at least a leader. You look at him and you think, okay, his policies, let's push them all to the side. Let's look at him as a person. He's a charismatic dude. He's definitely a leader. I don't get that from Biden. Not at all.
Yeah, instead you get gaffes, and he promises true enter off international depression and and all these gaffes. I am running for the Senate, he said. The guy is on a downward decline. He really is. And I honestly felt sorry for him. I thought this is elderly oppression. I honestly did. But this guy, he's a real piece of work. And I told you what a Joe Biden presidency means. It means more wars. It means, these issues aren't going to be solved anymore, like the mass incarceration of black people. It's going to get worse, these things. But if we look at some of the other anomalies going back to the election and fraud and arguments of fraud and all that, there is, of course, also
let's talk about it.
People dying, people that have been dead for decades, people that have been born in like 1901. Like this is literally what we're finding. Anecdotal evidence, but we're finding thousands of these cases, literally thousands of people that they've been dead for so long, and like usually older voters vote for the Republican anyway. That's the funny thing. Yet they're voting Democrat. But we've also got situations where in Pennsylvania, for example, the poll watchers were not allowed to go and observe these ballots. They were not allowed to check these things, because what happens, Ian, is when you get a mail-in ballot, and it's being opened, and there's a problem on the ballot, and it needs to be fixed. For example, maybe the person who signed it and filled in the circle for Donald Trump and Mike Pence, maybe they didn't do it dark enough, or maybe they did it for Joe Biden and it wasn't dark enough. So what happens is you're not allowed to fill those circles in unless there's a Republican poll watcher and a Democrat poll watcher.
Yeah.
This wasn't happening. This was not happening. In fact, the Republican poll watchers weren't even allowed to be in the same room in a lot of cases. In fact,
Why is that?
Mate, I don't want to talk to their intentions, but it is very nefarious. So what happened was, even in some cases, there were poll watchers who were watching from like 100 yards away. They had to get binoculars. There's videos of them watching with binoculars behind these tied ropes, just looking down this hall to where these ballots are being counted. It's absolutely insane what's been going on. So this went on for a little bit, a few hours or day or so, and then they took it to court and said, "What the hell? We need the GOP, the Republicans." They said, "We need to watch these ballots. This is not right. This is against the 14th Amendment, which says we should be treating all votes equally." And that's not what was going on. In fact, they were treating different counties differently. With some counties, they were filling in these circles that were more Democrat. And then with other counties, they weren't filling in the circle that were more Republican. So, you're going to have a lot more thrown out that are by error than the Democrats. So they took it to court. They took it to the court, and the judge ordered that in Pennsylvania. And the Pennsylvania is the big one. That's the big fish right now. That's 20 electoral votes. That's a lot. That situation there, the judge said, "You guys must allow them in." They still didn't let them in. Can you believe it? They still didn't let them in.
And well, that's bizarre. And what I'm struggling to think now, what did they do after that? If the judge has said you have to let them in, they haven't let them in. What's moving forward? What are we doing? What's going on there?
Look, they're collecting evidence at the moment. They're taking a lot of these legal fights to the courts and escalating them, taking them back to the courts, saying this guy, the Democrats went against what you said. So now they're elevating it to the next level, which is bringing it back to the same court and saying, "What the hell, man?" And then after that, and most likely, we'll see if it elevates as high as the Supreme Court. But this is all stuff we talked about. It's just dragging it out to December 14th. If we get to December 14th, then we're going to be in a very sticky situation for the Democrats, and it's going to be very interesting. But,
how so?
Well, December 14th is when, so technically, neither Joe Biden nor Donald Trump have received a single electoral college vote, technically.
Okay.
Because the way it works is, they do the votes, they do the polling, and then what happens is that what you're voting in is these electors, and these electors, they are the ones that come together, and they vote on December 14th they put their vote forward for their state. So if it was won by the Democrats, then the one Democrat will put that vote forward. If it was won by the Republicans, similar thing. Now the problem for the Democrats is they focus so much on fewer states than the Republicans, because they focus on the population heavy states like California, 55 electoral college votes. They're not going to spend as much time there as they would in North Carolina, which has a lot less votes. So because of that, on the December 14th, they all come together and make that case. However, if we're in a situation where these lawsuits extend past December 4th, so December 14th, we'll be in a situation where the electors will meet, and maybe they will vote. Maybe it's a state like Pennsylvania right now, which is, in the balance, and maybe because it's still a Republican elector there, maybe that elector will vote for Donald Trump rather than Joe Biden, even though this is still in the air. And that's where things truly get messy. I mean, if you think it's bad now, wait till that happens. That's when things really, really die. Now, traditionally what happens in these elections is you have a situation where, the presidential candidate that's losing would concede. That's what happened with Hillary. That's what's happened historically in the past. And that tells their side to stand down.
Yeah.
However, Donald Trump hasn't conceded
has
yet.
Not done that.
Exactly.
No.
So constitutionally speaking, legally speaking, he is still in this fight until he concedes. Even if the electors vote against him, there's still a situation where he could still be the presidency after Inauguration Day on January 20th. So
that would be baffling.
It would be baffling, and imagine the riots. In fact, and look, and this is the problem. No side standing down. I wrote this in my article 3 months ago. I said, guys, this mail-in ballot thing, it's not hyperbole. This thing could start a civil war. I had one doctor look over it, a doctor of political philosophy in Australia. He was reading over it because, I'm relatively new to writing articles. I said, what do you think? And he said, you see this one here, you're taking it a bit as granted. And I was like, that's because I genuinely think it's going to happen. He's not questioning it now. Not at all. He wanted me to take that line out. I didn't, because I genuinely think that was going to happen. It's there. So
let's talk about this. Let's unpack this idea of a civil war for a second, because there is obviously currently there's a lot of civil unrest in the States, and it's only going to get worse, as you were just discussing then, especially if Trump does not stand down, and if we get to the 14th of December and we have states which were considered to have been won by the Democrats turning in a Republican vote, things are going to go insane. A civil war does seem very, very, and I'm just playing devil's advocate here, it seems very unlikely from a logical sort of point of view, because you have such a powerful military in the States, which I immediately jumped to the thought, surely they would shut down anything before it escalates. So let's unpack the potential of a civil war really quick, because I'd love to hear how it could be a possibility.
Sure. It's a definitional problem. A lot of people have said that to me. We're not going to see a civil war. When I say civil war, what do people think? And correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what people think. They think the American Civil War. They think two sides looking at each other, firing, lines at each other. The racist South versus the North in the abolishment of the slave trade. That's not what I'm talking about. Of course, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about what Matt Taibbi wrote about earlier this year, and he's a writer in America. It's where the counting of heads starts to happen. It's where government officials, they start to work out which institutions for me, which ones against me. I mean, did you know this week that Donald Trump fired some of his top Pentagon leaders and put some of his own ones that he trusts a bit more?
Really? Just in this week?
Just this week. People do not see this stuff. I wish I had more time to cover this, but Tim Pool covers this very well. The problem that's going to happen with the civil war is it's the institutions turning in on each other, them starting to count who's on whose side. Do we have the police on our side? Do we have the judiciary on our side, the judges? Do we have the military on our side, even the top officials? Do we have the intelligence agencies, the FBI, the CIA, on whose side? That when the counting of heads happens, then we're in trouble. And it's been happening for a few months now. Look, if you ask me technically, how long is this civil war? Like, when are people going to say the civil war started? I'm going to say it started in late 2016. I really do. I mean, what would you call it?
Okay. Why is that?
Well, what would you call it when an incoming administration is sabotaged and spied on by the Obama administration? Because that's exactly what happened. Let's be under no illusions here. That is not hyperbole. It was Joe Biden that suggested that, we used the Logan Act to spy on General Flynn and unmask him so that people could see him. And that was the thing that ended up General Flynn getting him into a lot of trouble from talking to foreign leaders. It was the Obama administration that was spying into the Trump administration, trying to sabotage it. There was a meeting in January, December, when they sat down with the intelligence agencies and they were trying to work out how can we pin this guy. And that's how Russiagate
This guy being Trump.
And that's how Russiagate started, man. That's how we've been talking for Russia, 3.5 years now. It's funny how Russia forgot about this year, isn't it? Isn't that funny? If Russia was as powerful as they say, where did they go this year? Did they forget? Did they forget that there was a US election? Because I can tell you right now, everything that's happened this year has either happened because of or has been made worse because of the US election. That's what I truly believe to be true. But
right, okay. So just
sure.
Talking about the Civil War again and the counting of heads being the marker for what we're calling a civil war, how badly could that escalate? Because I know in my mind, when I picture the Civil War, it's not quite your red uniforms and your blue uniforms shooting at each other in a line with cannons. It's more fighting in the streets, small militias performing assaults on key areas and targets, government buildings, police stations, courts, so forth.
Okay.
How likely is something like that?
Where have you been these last 4 months, my friend?
I know. Okay. I know we've seen the protests and we've seen attacks like that.
That's exactly what we've been seeing. That is precisely what we've been seeing. Burning of courthouses, burning of police stations, people dying. Over 50 people died from these protests, man. Clashes between sides. Have you seen Antifa versus the Proud Boys face down these last few years? Clashes on campus, $3 million worth of damage to Berkeley University when a Jewish guy and when Milo Yiannopoulos visits the campus. Bro, this is exactly what we've been seeing. I mean, it hasn't turned up as much as you'd probably want. It hasn't reached that threshold where you're like, okay, America's lost it. But by that point, there's lots of little steps that get you there. And these are those little steps. I mean, it's just a definitional problem. At what point you define it as a civil war, and at what point you say when are you saying in your mind, when has the civil war started? At what point is it when we have identifiable factions?
Which we have.
Yeah. Like, what's your definition for it?
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I guess in a civil war. Identifiable factions, and I'm picking it apart in my own mind as we discuss this and trying to challenge what I currently hold as a belief of a civil war, or a definition, as you said. And immediately, about 5 minutes ago, you say civil war, and I think side versus side, army versus army. But you then said factions, and now I'm thinking, well, of course, there could be multiple different factions, two main sides and small militias, which you're absolutely right. We do already have in the States. So that leads me to the next question, which is, how bad could things get? How unchecked, how long would this go unchecked before some sort of force or some sort of authority comes in and says no? And what would it take to stop that? Would it take some sort of, I don't want to exaggerate here, but some form of dictatorship or some sort of absolute control from the government to bring everything back into line? I know that sounds dystopian and 1984-ish, but
I don't know, man. You're not wrong though. You're not wrong to be worried about that. That could totally happen. We could be in a situation where Joe Biden cracks down on all these Trump supporters. I mean, just this last 24 hours, I was up at 4 a.m. last night because I was watching what was going on with the 1 million people showing up to Washington, D.C., 1 million Trump supporters all rallying for Trump for this Stop the Steal rally because they believe that the election's being stolen from them. That
occurred a few hours ago.
That occurred a few hours ago. And you know what happened? They all showed up. They all did a great job and expressed their feelings peacefully. Because let's not forget, D.C. in preparation for the election was completely boarded up. All the businesses were covered. Well, what did we see happen? Well, they had a peaceful protest. This was a properly peaceful protest. They expressed their ideas, and what ended up happening? We had Donald Trump. He drove past and he showed his face there for briefly, and then everyone went away. And then Antifa showed up once things went dark, and they started assaulting people. I've got so much footage I haven't put out yet, but it's really, at what point does it enter a civil war? I mean, seriously, guys, this is not a game. This hasn't been a game for the last 4 years. This has been literally the battle for the soul of a nation and the future of the world. I warned you, Ian, last time we chatted. I warned you what a Joe Biden presidency would mean. It means more wars in the Middle East. It means the mass incarceration of more people. It means that we're going to see, an economy with a very slow recovery. It means the rise of China, and that's terrible for Australia. It means the European Union will have Brexit may not be pushed over the line. All of these things we're seeing right now come to fruition because everyone around the world is like, okay, Joe Biden's got it. Brexit is in a very bad position right now in the US. In fact, in the UK.
Let's unpack that for a second.
Yeah, sure.
Brexit and how that's going to be impacted. That's a really interesting one and something that I haven't thought about at all, being impacted by this election. So tell us about that, Joel.
Well, look, Brexit is obviously the UK leaving the European Union. And the problem with Brexit right now is they left in 2016 and they said, we don't want to be part of this massive government, basically. Because, I mean, if you think one big government's bad, imagine two big governments. That's the European Union and the UK government. So what you've got is a situation where they said they wanted to leave in 2016. They reaffirmed that twice last year. They had European elections in early in the year in 2019. And they had elections again in December last year. It was a 100-year defeat of the Labour Party. It was massive. There were Labour seats which had never gone conservative for 100 years over there, and they turned to conservative. Wow. In fact, the Conservative government, by the way, FYI, over there, they have something like 800 seats up and down the country, just like our parliament, but it's like 800 seats. It's a lot. The Conservative Party won an 80-seat majority, which is massive. 80 seats.
Wow.
Yes. So 80 seats more than 50%.
And this massive change from Labor to Conservative, we're seeing this as a result of perhaps, a better word would be, we're seeing this as a result of inspiration for Brexit and a desire for Brexit. That's right. That's what's driving this massive change.
100%.
Okay.
And on top of that, the assumption was that it was to get out so we could trade on World Trade Organization rules. Because the problem was when they were negotiating trade deals in the past, they had to use the European rules to negotiate everything. And that was terrible because the European Union had, worse their restrictions on the environment were actually not as good as, the UK had them before. Their restrictions on a number of things meant that they didn't get the best deal, basically. I put it that way to you guys on a very low level understanding of it. But the thing was they were hoping to have a big deal with the US. But do you know what Obama said to them in 2016 when they were debating this topic before they voted for Brexit? He said, if you vote, he actually visited the UK and he said to them, if you vote for Brexit, then you will go to the back of the line in all negotiations. That's what he said. Now, if you have Joe Biden, who was the vice president at the time, and everything he said to date this year, the reason why he said you need to vote for me is because I was, the vice president of Obama. Do you think he's going to walk in the same steps? In fact, he was once asked about Brexit, and do you know what his reply was? He said, "I'm Irish." Now, for those of you that don't know, Ireland, it's not a part of the UK. They're a very strong part of the European Union. So it was his way of saying, I like the European Union. And what you guys did was stupid. So that's Brexit. And in Australia, we've got a situation with Scott Morrison is in a very difficult situation because he knows he's in a difficult position with China. Some would say that he's being paid by China. I don't go that far.
Okay.
And because it's not a foreign concept. We know that there are politicians that receive big money from corporations, and some of these corporations are Chinese owned. That's just the nature of business,
Of course.
But to go, I don't take it that step further and say he's being paid directly by China. But I don't think that he's the most effective leader we could be having right now. And he knows he's in a difficult position. He knows that he's in a situation where he needs the US's support, and he's desperate for it. That's why he called Joe Biden this week, and they chatted about the future of the Australia-US relationship. But the problem with sorry.
I'll just cut in really quick for those listening. The reason we're discussing here why Morrison has called up the US and had a chat to them is because we're currently under a massive threat from China. And that's why this is so important. I just wanted to interject and say that. And that's why
you're absolutely right. You're absolutely
right. It is important that we have a strong relationship with the US because you have the US and China who are extremely powerful world players. And if China decides to continue to bully and place pressure on Australia, we need a powerful ally, that being the US.
Yeah.
So let's jump into it and talk about about moving forward with our relationship with the US and what the Biden presidency could help us with, or oppositely, negatively impact us relating to China.
Look, it's not good, man. It's not good at all. When Donald Trump got in, he increased the military budget by 10%, which is a lot. And what that ended up doing was it ended up revitalizing the US Navy. I can't see that happening under Joe Biden. I can see him wanting to cut military costs. And speaking to the military industrial complex, I can also see him getting involved more in foreign wars in Syria. In fact, you remember how I said to you, especially with the Middle East, do you remember I said to you that the counting of heads happens and you start to see the different aspects and the different institutions in a government fight against each other? Well, we just learned this week that because I said to you, Donald Trump's doing great work in the Middle East. These, 4 peace deals that he got through, which are historic. And we also had a situation where he was trying to pull the troops out of the Middle East, namely Syria and Afghanistan. Well, in Syria, we just learned this week that not only did he say that he wanted to pull the troops out, but when he said that in 2019 and before, the government officials there that were meant to be telling him how many troops were really there, they actually they weren't truthful with the amount of troops that were there. They said there were only 200 or so there, when in actuality there were a lot more than that. So we literally have a situation. We've got government officials that are lying to the Donald Trump administration and saying we don't have as many troops as you think, in order to manipulate and to hide the fact that we do have a lot of troops there. And I know you want to pull them out, but I don't want you to pull them out. I mean, at what point does this become a civil war where they completely go against the what they're saying? So coming back to China, the US has a very important role to play in the Middle East and securing peace. And with China, they're also looking to extend their influence around the world. Now, with China, the origins of the coronavirus, the investigation we're trying to get pushed forward. Do you really think Joe Biden's going to be tough on that? I don't think so. In fact, it was Joe Biden that said Donald Trump shouldn't have done a travel ban with China when they did when coronavirus came out. He called it a racist move. And
that's just
I know. In fact,
that's just not the strength you want to see in a leader, worrying about those sorts of things when it's paired up against something like a pandemic, the virus.
Yeah. In fact,
that's not.
There were people like Nancy Pelosi.
That's just cushy.
There were people like Nancy Pelosi. She, you know who she is. She's the current leader of the House, And what she was doing was, she at the time, she's not only did she say that he was racist for saying that, to doing a travel ban to stop the pandemic. She was also in Chinatown while she was saying it, and she was saying, "Everyone come down to Chinatown. We must love his hate." I was like, oh, come on, man.
That's just messy.
It's very messy. So this was
just messy, and that's not driven. You want someone who's driven and is going to make the tough calls. Because, okay, yes, a travel ban with a certain country, it doesn't look great. It's going to piss off the other country. It's going to piss off the people in your country who originate from said country. Yes, 100%. It's not going to be cool with a lot of people. However, tough decisions like that, especially in the times of a pandemic, need to be made. Now, with this whole pandemic, there is honestly such little information and so much misinformation floating about that who knows what the best plan for attacking this virus is. I mean, really, who the hell knows? However, something straightforward like that, as in cutting off the source of the virus, and this is opening up a whole new corona conversation, but that just seems to be a logical move. And I don't think you can argue the practicality of cutting off the source of a virus, that being China in this instance.
Exactly. Do you know Drew Pavlo? You know him?
No.
He's a guy in Queensland. He's been fighting with the University of Queensland with the Chinese influence in that place. And he's right to point it out. He's a progressive. He's really progressive. He probably would have wanted Bernie Sanders to win the presidential nominee-ship for the Democrat Party this year.
Very progressive.
I used to be that progressive. I really did. And then I told you, I started to learn the facts, and I started to learn they were lying about Trump, and they're leaving the second half of the fact out of the story. And I have been having so many discussions with Drew, back and forth on Facebook. I'd love to sit down with him in person. I get tired of social media sometimes. I'd love, because he believes that Joe Biden will be tougher on China than Trump. And I'm like, are you serious? Are you kidding me? In what way? The guy's actually got ties to China. Like, his son has business dealings with Chinese companies. This is not a joke. This is not a conspiracy theory. There is a paper trail. And the media blackout and the big tech blackout on this information is very suspect. Yeah. Very suspect. So are we going to just going to pretend that's not a thing?
And so we have that as an issue, and I'm just figuring out how to bring it back now, because we were about to talk about the implications of this new relationship with China that the US is going to have, and how that affects as an Australian, our relationship with China and our daily lives. So let's jump back into that and talk about how, yes, the Biden administration, it has a paper trail which leads to them holding hands with the Chinese government. Let's talk about why that's bad.
Okay, well, fundamentally, it goes back to values. What do you value? What country do you want to live in? Well, I mean, Riccardo Bosi, he outlays the sort of country he wants to live in very, meticulously. He wants to live in a sovereign country that's free, where you can believe in the result of your election, where you believe that, you believe in the concept of an important family and cultural values. You don't believe in persecuting minorities, like we saw in China with the Uyghur Muslims, 1 million people in camps.
Terrible.
I mean, do you think Joe Biden's going to confront that? No, that's not going to happen.
No, because that would make him look like a racist.
Exactly. It was Joe Biden, after all, that he presided over the administration that locked up and separated kids from their parents on the southern border. It wasn't Trump that started that. I mean, I don't know what people, I think they just don't know. They just don't know, Ian, man. They just don't know about these facts. And that's why the role of our channels is so important, to bring it to their attention. It's that our media in Australia has been lying to us. Either been lying or they didn't know.
I think that the fact that people don't know these facts, myself included, because every time we have a chat, I learn something new. But the reason that Biden has done so well in this election, and correct me that I'm wrong, is that a lot of people see him as the lesser of two evils. As in, they're not voting for Biden, they're voting against Trump. And a vote against Trump is a vote for Biden.
Yeah, that's right.
Do you hear me?
No, you're
Do you
right.
know what I'm getting at here?
No, I know what you mean. And I think I posed the question to you last time. I said, no one to date has made the argument effectively to me why they're voting for Biden without using the word Trump. They just can't do it.
That is a good point.
I mean, it's all about orange man bad. They can't say, and this is the problem. Joe Biden never outlaid his agenda. Especially even on the coronavirus thing, they kept hammering him on this coronavirus thing. They say he mismanaged this, he mismanaged that. Well, first of all, find me a government that's managed it well. There isn't one, except maybe Sweden.
No, it's been a disaster.
It's been a disaster, and that's why any government that says, "Oh, we would have managed it better," is like, really, would you have? I don't believe that for a second.
I don't think that we can make any realistic claims about how to manage the virus for another couple of years until we've really sat down and unpacked some of the evidence and some of the studies that come out of it. Yeah. Anyone who thinks that they understand it 100% right now is just being arrogant.
Exactly, and that's the problem as well. But part of the problem I have with China is they've been withholding this information. We've got a ton of... We didn't know it was airborne long after they knew. Long after. And China shut off travel within China, but they didn't shut off travel within China to other countries. It's like, are you serious? Are you serious? Sorry, go on.
So I've just had a thought here. So we've got China, who, as you mentioned earlier, it really is all about your values and what sort of country you would like to live in. And we have people voting for Biden because of the belief that Trump does not support their values. Therefore, they're voting for Biden because he's the progressive, he's the lesser of two evils. However, we don't realize, and as I said earlier, I'm only learning this myself as we go, that Biden, he really may not be the lesser of two evils, and he's in bed with a government who have suppressed and put people into concentration camps, minorities, the Uyghur Muslims. They have withheld information on a serious pandemic that's going around the world right now. There's already two things which I know go against every progressive person's values, every conservative person's values: lying and the suppression of minorities, the mistreatment, extreme, severe mistreatment of minorities. We also have Joe Biden. He's, as you said earlier, he deported millions of people. It's his administration which built the cages, which I found very interesting for you to point out last week or 2 weeks ago. And we've also got the military complex, the military industrial complex.
That's right.
I think that's right.
Yep.
Where they've got drone strikes on hospitals, on school buses, selling arms to Saudi Arabia, supporting the illegal blockade of Yemen through that selling of arms to Saudi Arabia.
There you go.
So we have that whole issue in the Middle East.
That's right.
So really, and sorry, I cut you off earlier there because I wanted to say this. Really, Biden's not looking like the lesser of two evils.
He's not. When
it comes to voting based on your values, the lack of information out there is resulting in a lot of people voting for a party, really, because that's what it's about, isn't it? It's the party. It's not quite the person, which really doesn't uphold any of their values, any values that most Australians want to support, just to bring it back to Australians.
That's right. No, Trump, the argument that he was the lesser of two evils may have been right in 2016 because we didn't know what he was going to do. He was a completely, what did they say? They used to say, you'd rather the devil you know than the devil you don't know. That's what they were saying because everyone was familiar with Hillary Clinton. Well, that's not the case anymore. The case is that he didn't go to war with North Korea, even though they warned us that he would. He was responsible with nuclear codes when they thought that he was going to lose his crap and fire a missile in anger. That didn't happen. That wasn't a thing. He ended up having the most successful run in the Middle East we've ever seen for the last 40 years. He got a peace deal with the UAE, Israel, Bahrain, and I think there's one coming up with, was it Nigeria or Ethiopia? I think it was Nigeria.
Yeah.
that says something, you know?
It does. It definitely does. Peace deals. I don't think anyone associates the Trump administration with peace deals at all.
Not at all.
Now, another thing that I wanted to bring up is we have a lot of people bring this argument forward, and I myself can't really talk to it much because I don't know too much about either party's policies. But the Trump administration neglected or refused to sign on to the climate change agreement that's going.
Yeah, let's do it.
I can hear you laughing in the background there.
Yeah,
so
no, go for it. Let's do it, man.
I'll let you take it from here. I feel like you have your answer prepared. So
go for it. Go for it.
So we have the United Nations who brought forward the 2050, the policy, which I'm butchering this because I don't know the exact policy, but by 2050, there's a certain amount of goals that the UN want people to meet, countries to meet. Trump refused to sign on to these. A lot of people bring that argument forward and talk about how Trump's administration has no care for the environment, for climate change, for sustainability, which are really important to a lot of young people nowadays, and more increasingly so older generations as well. So let's talk about what Biden's offering as far as climate change, sustainability, and the 2050 agreement goes.
Oh, look, he's going to sign up to all of it again. He is a globalist, and that is not a conspiracy theory. That is, when I say globalist, it means he wants to be connected with all these global institutions and make more of a one world government. Now, I'm having people switch off when they hear that. They'll be like, oh, it's a conspiracy theory. No, that's literally, it's in the words. He wants more of a unified one world government, another step closer to a Star Trek world where it's like one government and they all have, the Starfleet sort of thing. That's like 1,000 years from now. So it's another step in that direction. Problem with that view is we're not there yet. We don't have an abundance of resources. We have limited, resources and materials, and we're in a situation where there are still significant issues between peoples. I mean, look at Israel and Syria and the Palestinians. Look at North and South Korea. There's still problems we've got to work through. We can't just rush these things as the globalists want. And on top of that, bringing it back to Joe Biden's words, he has said, on day one, I will sign up back again to the Paris Climate Accord. He will do it straight away.
That's the one.
Donald Trump got out of it literally in his as soon as he got in the office in 2017. He got out of that thing. Why? What's wrong with it? Well, did you know that India and China are the biggest emitters in the world? Did you know that?
Yeah.
Now, the problem with that agreement was they wouldn't have to do anything until 2030. For 15 years, they could emit as much as they wanted, and only in 2030, this is what Obama negotiated. He was the one that got them on board with this. Only at 2030 would there be, anything they would have to do. Now, I just see a problem with this, man, because you get people like AOC in 2018 wanting that we've only got 12 years to save the earth. Well, 12 years is that estimate not true? Because if it was true, why have I never heard AOC criticize China? Not once. Not once in the 4 years I've been following politics. What is the problem with them criticizing China? Because China,
you bring forward an interesting point.
Yeah, well, and this is the thing though, but
because we have, the reason that they gave them to 2030, I believe, is because the developing parts of those nations, which is the majority of those nations, India and China, are so reliant on fossil fuels and energy sources that we as developed nations can go without a lot easier without sacrificing the quality of our life. A lot of places over there, developing regions in those countries, if they did sign on and start to cut off using fossil fuel as a resource, the quality of life would decline severely and people would struggle. And I believe that that's why they said you don't have to start until 2030, with the idea that they would slowly start moving towards that goal. However, you're absolutely right. Politicians have been coming forward now and saying, oh, we only have 12 years. We have
15 years until irreversible damage has been done. It's a bit of it doesn't quite make sense.
But hang on a sec. The US in 2017, in 2018, in 2019, they led the world in reducing emissions. They led the world. They left the Paris Climate Agreement, yet they still led the world in reducing carbon emissions. What does that tell you? Maybe you don't need an international agreement to do well. Maybe Trump is actually good on the environment. Did you ever consider that? Or are you just sort of remembering what the media have told you? That is a fact. Look it up now. Donald Trump, America led the world in that. Why? Because they did a lot of fracking. They replaced a lot of their emissions with gas. It turns out there are alternatives like nuclear.
Nuclear is a very interesting alternative.
It is, and it exposes.
I like that.
And you should. Any upright, person that's being honest when they approach these discussions is like, well, why aren't we doing nuclear? Why is it in Australia we have a 15-year ban on proposing nuclear energy in Parliament? Why did the Greens get away with that? Don't they want to reduce emissions? Isn't carbon, the biggest problem we've got these days? These are questions that need to be asked, because the quickest way to work out if someone is arguing in good faith with you on the climate is, do they believe in nuclear energy? I have friends who are progressives, true Marxists, yet they agree on nuclear energy with me. In fact, one of my friends, his dad's a nuclear physicist. He's Venezuelan. He's a socialist, a democratic socialist. He likes AOC. He likes Bernie Sanders. And he says, of course we need nuclear energy. These people that just want, the problems with solar and wind is you can't store the energy yet, the battery capacity. We don't have the technology yet. Now we do.
Yeah.
And
that's exactly right.
And look, this is the thing. With the climate change stuff. Why should Australia sacrifice, when was the Paris Agreement done? 2015, 2014? I can't remember. But why should
2015, I believe.
2015. Yeah. Why should Australia sacrifice for 15 years their entire economy? Because that's what we're talking about. It's the longest, economic suicide note. I think that's what Alan Jones was describing the Labor policy of. Because Labor in Australia in 2019, they wanted to follow what the Paris Agreement was saying. Why would we do that for 15 years, decimate our economy, put our own people in poverty? Older people can't afford their bills. Older people are dying in their homes. Poverty isn't just a third world country thing. It happens here too. Suicide rates going up because people are losing their jobs in Australia. We used to have the cheapest energy in the world, Ian. We used to have it. And then what happened was we signed up onto all of this crap. We only emit, 1 point something of the world's emissions. Yeah, we've got China doing this for 30% year on year. Why should we decimate our economy? Why should we be lambasted by these Greens people saying, if you don't agree to this, why are you denying climate change, Scott Morrison? Why are you trying to kill my future? What? And this is why I hate the ABC and the Q&A. They put these young people in front of these senators and they say, why are you killing me? Why are you killing my future? It's like, what about China, guys? Are we going to really ignore this? Really? You're going to say in 12 years the place is going to blow up? Whereas China's emitting 30% of the world's emissions and they're not making any meaningful steps to reduce it for 15 years. This is my problem. This is my problem with the climate stuff. So it turns out Donald Trump is actually better on the climate. It turns out he takes a more responsible approach to managing the climate, as we saw with the US being the lead in reducing carbon emissions around the world. Yeah. And now we're in a situation where we're going to see more money thrown at these technologies which have not worked yet. They can work maybe in the future if the technology comes up. I believe we should keep investing in places like Tesla. I think that's the future, but we're not there yet. And the more we push now, the worse it's going to be for our economy. We're going to be killing more people from suicide and decimating our economy. That's the truth of it.
Yeah, I'm really glad we got a chance to unpack that, because it is something that I think about quite a lot, and something that I didn't quite understand regarding the two parties over in the US, which one really stands strongest on green change and climate change and sustainability. But that's really interesting that you brought that forward about the Trump administration leading the world in those areas. And again, it comes back to a lot of people, myself included, as a prime example for everyone listening right now. I didn't know that. And immediately in my head, knowing that Trump is the conservative and Biden is the progressive, and I'm doing air quotes sitting here on my laptop as I say those two words, I immediately just assumed that Biden was better for it.
Mm.
And you only hear about that information about Trump denying to sign on to the Paris Accord. You don't hear about him leading the US into the position of the leading country within climate change.
Yeah. And look, this is the thing. It goes back to this concept.
Interesting.
It is very interesting because it's a manipulation of us. It's interesting to see this policy, this concept. Sometimes what a politician puts forward sounds great. It's great marketing. You know, Scott Morrison, we call him Scotty from marketing because that's what his degree's in. Yet it doesn't do good. It doesn't. You know, I believe in, and here's another good example I'm sure we'll talk about eventually. I believe in a living wage. I believe that $15 should be the minimum wage. We shouldn't have anything lower than $15. You can't live off $15, anything less than $15 per hour. That's the debate that Bernie Sanders says.
I think we'd all struggle to live on $15 an hour as well.
That sounds right, doesn't it? I thought that too. Then guess what? It actually turns out that's not good. It turns out if you scrape above the surface, that if you enforce as a government, you pass legislation, say you must pay your employees $15 or more minimum, or you are breaking the law, you'll be fined, you'll be put out of business, you'll be prosecuted, we'll side with the employee. Turns out these businesses either go out of business, they'll close their doors, or they have to sack, because let's say you've got 3 workers. Here's the best example. They're all being paid. Okay. They're all being paid $10 an hour. You bring the law in. You bring the law in. You say $15 is minimum. What do you have to do? You're like, well, I'm already operating on the margins. I'm going to have to sack one to give the other 2 the $5 from the other employee. So now you have to sack 1/3 of the employees to get the other 2 where they needed to be. This is the reality, and this isn't like a theory in terms of, you know, this might happen. This has happened. There are 50 states in America. We've got so many case studies where this has happened, where they bring in a minimum wage and it completely decimates the economy or an industry. And this is the problem. You're right. There's some truth in what they say. You can't live off $15 an hour if you are a mother with kids, if you are an adult that's been working in the workforce for a long time. But this is the problem. You've got it's sort of a systemic problem. A mother of that age isn't meant to be on $10 an hour. She's not. She's meant to be on a higher wage. Why isn't she there yet? Well, there's a good answer for that. Because when you bring minimum wages in, then the situation you're in is you can't actually hire someone for that lower rate. So if you're a young person and you're going into the workforce, you're not going to be hired if you can't give that person or that business a $10 or more, if that makes sense. So if an employee says, I can only hire you if you give me $15 an hour worth of work, and you can only give them 10, they're not going to hire you. So what does that mean? That means the young person doesn't get into the workforce, they don't get the necessary skills that they need, and they can't rise through the ranks. Does that sort of make sense now? So
that makes complete sense. Yeah, I think that's a really good. You've put that well. So that's very clear in my mind right now.
So there should be no minimum wage. That is the answer. Why? Because I've been working since I was 14 years old. I've been working on the construction site with Dad. For the first 3 years, I got paid nothing. Yet, according to government legislation, that's illegal. But, I just say that, I was just working the family business. I can do that and not get paid.
Yeah.
Now, if the government said I couldn't do that, that means I wouldn't have gotten the skills. I wouldn't have developed the laboring skills to work on a construction site so that I could earn anywhere from $150 a day to $350 a day per day on site. See how the government, everything they put their hand to sounds great, but it doesn't do great once the jury's in, once the analysis comes through. That's the problem. That is the lesson everyone should learn from the left. Sounds great, doesn't do great, and it goes to the psychology of people nowadays. They want something that sounds great in the immediate, yet doesn't do great. Like pornography, for example, that's a great one. It's a widespread issue. It's self-gratifying initially.
Oh, yeah.
It's self-gratifying initially, and I know a ton of young men that do this. Self-gratifying initially, however, it turns out that there's problems in the future. There's problems with your getting off with your partner in the future. There's problems with erectile problems in the future.
We've all heard about the issues that pornography brings up, especially with erectile dysfunction and the whole suite of sexual issues that you could experience. And that would actually be a really interesting episode to do sometime, because I know a lot of our listeners, I'm pretty sure that most of our listeners are male. We definitely have female listeners out there. Shout out to you guys. But that would be an interesting episode, because God knows that pornography is bad. And I'm going on a tangent here, but the whole industry itself needs a serious shuffle up and rearrangement in terms of workers' rights and what's being put out there. Anyway, we digress. A lot. We started off with US elections and we've jumped into pornography. I love it. Amazing. Well,
can I briefly finish on this last point on the US election to bring it all back?
Of course. Yeah, I'd love that.
So bringing it back to the US, we know that there are irregularities with this election. As we just did, we demonstrated this election influences things around the world. From Brexit to Australia and China to wars in the Middle East to, a ton of different things. And these policies that people are passing sound great, but they don't do great. Now, with the US, this is why I've been paying attention to it. And this is why we've all been paying attention to it, because these elections in these swing states will determine the presidency, the Senate as well in Georgia. That's not decided yet. And that will result in the direction of the world on all of these issues. And that's why the leader of the free world is so important. Now, in a lot of these swing states, there are other irregularities, which I didn't touch on. There are bellwether counties, which bellwether counties are counties where they always predict the presidential winner every single election. I don't know why, but they just do. And there are irregularities where they didn't predict that this time and Biden won, which is like, what? There are counties that voted for Donald Trump, which haven't voted for Donald Trump in 100 years, just like what we saw in the UK. Why?
Wow.
This is very suspicious, very suspicious.
Yeah, and
we can't be in a situation where half the country is wondering if this is a legitimate election. We need to have the investigations. If nothing comes up, so be it. Joe Biden's the president.
Okay.
And this is what we can expect. But if not, we need these answers and something needs to happen.
You've put that excellently. I think that's a great way to wrap up our coverage of the current state of the US and how that impacts the world. It's been an absolutely bizarre election. And Joel, it's been great to have you along for the ride. I'm sure we'll be catching up again regarding what's going on over in the US, specifically after the 14th of December, which we've marked as a very, very important date. Somewhat exciting, I must say.
I suspect we'll be having another one sooner. If some of these court cases come out, then there's going to be a lot of hype. But yeah, December 14th would be good.
Yeah, man, thank you very much for discussing all of this and unpacking some of the myths surrounding the two different parties. I think we've definitely had a big look into the issue of Joe Biden and the Republican Party and the fake news around Donald Trump. I know everyone laughs and says that he's famous for coining that term, but it's really interesting that there actually is a lot of fake news out there.
Yeah.
Some of which I'm really happy we've been able to unpack right now.
Thank you for your time. It's been awesome.
No, thank you for coming on. This has been a great chat. I would love to finish, however, on something completely unrelated. You know that we have our segments. We've gone for a while now, so we won't do all of the segments. Let's wrap up on what our entertainment has been for the week. And you're not allowed to answer with US politics.
Oh, no. You've got me there. Entertainment for the week. All right. I was playing some video games this week. and I was playing with my cousins, and I was playing the Halo Master Chief Collection, and we were playing the Halo 3 campaign, and it's just the best. I love.
Nice.
And what you can do is you can actually play with 4 players, not just 2 players on the campaign, and it's just the best. It's just so much fun. So there you go. There's a little humanity in me.
He's a human after all, ladies and gentlemen. Joel Jammal.
That's right,
no, I actually, that's funny because I played the Halo 3 campaign with my younger brother. Maybe a few months ago, we jumped into it and we had a bit of fun. What a campaign, dude! It's a really great game. I must say,
it might be the best. I'm not sure.
It's up there for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
So, my entertainment recently, I purchased. Have you heard of the Dune series by Frank Herbert?
No, I haven't.
Sci-fi book.
I haven't actually.
So Frank Herbert's been coined as the forefather of science fiction. You know, before we had Star Wars, before we had Star Trek, Frank Herbert was out here writing about Dune. And I won't go into it because he's created an entire universe which is beyond impressive. And I recently ordered the box set of 7 books in the series. And there's plenty of sequels and prequels that I haven't yet purchased, but this is the main storyline. And guys, I have never read anything so interesting or compelling. Also relatable in today's current climate. The whole idea behind Dune is unpacking the Messiah complex from what I've read so far, and the actual issues and the dark side of having a Messiah or a hero. So it's a great series with a really interesting information if you read between the lines. So I'm loving that at the moment. I can't put it down.
That's awesome. Good to hear. Yeah, good. Always nice to get out of what's happening in the world today and read a book. It's always great.
Oh, definitely. And with that, Joel, I just want to thank you for your time again. Thank you for all the information you've provided us with. Definitely a lot of food for thought. I can't wait to plunge myself into some self-turmoil trying to unpack all this information for the next few days.
Good idea, Ian. And thank you everyone
thank you
everyone for listening. I know we've had a few hundred tune in on YouTube, which has been awesome.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. Awesome. That's you're bringing such an audience to us. Thank you again, man.
No worries.
Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
You too. You have a great one.
All right. See you later. Thanks for listening, guys.
See you.
Okay. That was good, man. That was really fun.